You never expect betrayal to come from your own blood. You never imagine that the people you love most, the ones you raised, protected, and trusted might turn on you when you're at your weakest. But that's exactly what happened to me. My name is Margaret. I'm 78 years old, and I've lived a full life, one filled with hard work, quiet, joy, heartbreak, and endurance. I'm not rich, I'm not famous, but I am strong, and I've always taken pride in that. I was a nurse for almost 40 years. I've seen pain up close. I've held hands with strangers as they took their final breaths. I've stitched wounds and soothed souls. Through it all, I learned one thing. Nothing is more sacred than home. And mine was everything. My husband George and I bought our little house when we were in our early 30s. It wasn't much, a small, single-story place with a creaky porch and a garden out front, but we built it into something beautiful. Every corner of that house held memories, birthday parties, quiet Sunday mornings, the smell of pancakes on the stove, George singing off-key in the shower. After he passed, that house became my anchor, my safe place. So when I found myself lying in a hospital bed after a routine hip surgery, vulnerable and disoriented, the last thing I expected was to discover that someone I loved was trying to take all of that away from me. It started with a conversation I didn't even hear. My eldest daughter, let's call her Diane, told the hospital staff that she was taking care of my affairs while I recovered. She said she needed to grab a few things from my house, some clothes, some toiletries. The nurses believed her. Why wouldn't they? She was my daughter. What they didn't know was that Diane had found an old power of attorney I had signed years ago, back when George was still alive. At the time, it seemed harmless, a backup plan. Just in case, we'd said. I didn't realize that just in case would turn into a weapon used against me while I lay in that hospital bed. Diane was at my house with a real estate agent. She was smiling for pictures on the porch, walking through my living room, listing my home online as vacant, available immediately, and ideal for investors. She had no intention of telling me. She thought I was too frail to notice, too weak to stop her. I didn't find out from her. I found out from a nurse. One afternoon, as she helped me adjust my pillow, she smiled and said, "Margaret, I saw your house online. I didn't know you were selling. Are you moving somewhere warmer?" My heart dropped. "What do you mean?" I asked. She showed me the listing on her phone. There it was. My front door, my living room, my kitchen. All photographed, all listed, publicly. And I had no idea. The betrayal hit like a punch to the chest. The room spun. My throat closed. How could she? How could my own daughter, my flesh and blood, do this to me? I wasn't dead. I wasn't incapable. I was recovering. That's all. I demanded my phone. Called Diane. She answered with a cheerful, "Hi, Mom." I asked her, straight out, "Are you selling my house?" There was a pause, then a sigh. "Mom," she said, "I was going to tell you, but this is what's best. You can't live alone anymore. The house is old, you're not safe there." I found a lovely assisted living place with a private room, and I hung up, not because I was angry, but because I was heartbroken, because I knew, at that moment, that this wasn't about my safety. It was about control, about money, about convenience, and I was done being silent. This story isn't just about real estate, it's about dignity, about what it means to grow old in a world that treats seniors like burdens, about the courage it takes to say, "No, you will not erase me. You will not take what is mine." This is how I fought back, how I stood my ground, and how I reclaimed my home and my voice. Looking back, there were signs, subtle ones, moments I dismissed as stress or mood swings. But now, after everything, I see them clearly, like little alarm bells I chose to silence. It started a few months before my surgery. My call her Diane began visiting more frequently. At first, I was touched. I thought, well, she finally has time for her old mother. She brought groceries, offered to organize my medications, and even suggested she handle some of my bills to make things easier. I felt grateful. After all, how many seniors are blessed with children who show up like that? But there was something different in her tone. She started referring to the house as a lot for someone your age. She'd sigh when I talked about fixing the roof or cleaning the attic. One day, while we were having tea, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "Mom, why don't you just let go of all this? It's too much. You could be relaxing somewhere, letting people take care of you." It stung a little, the way she said it, like I was a burden to myself. Still, I laughed it off. I told her I liked my independence, that I wasn't ready to give up the house or my routines, and I thought that was that. But then came the paperwork. She showed up one Sunday with a folder, told me it was standard stuff just in case of emergencies. Inside was a durable power of attorney, already filled out with her name. She said, "It's just in case something happens, Mom, you know, like if you're in the hospital or can't make decisions." I hesitated. She noticed. She smiled. "Trust me," she said. "You're still the boss. I'm just the backup." And I signed it, because that's what you do when you believe your daughter loves you. But after that, things changed. She started referring to the house as the property. She asked me to show her where I kept important documents, my will, the deed, insurance papers. I remember her flipping through them with this strange look on her face, like she was doing inventory. That's when I felt it in my gut. Something wasn't right, but I said nothing. Why? Because I loved her, because I raised her, because it's hard to believe your own child might see you not as a person, but as a problem to solve, or, worse, as an asset to claim. I told myself she was just trying to help, that maybe I was being paranoid, that old age was making me overly sensitive, but deep down, I knew. And that's the cruel part. Sometimes, the betrayal doesn't come as a sharp knife, but as a slow, quiet suffocation. It disguises itself as care. It smiles at you, brings you soup, tucks you into bed. And all the while, it's counting down the days until you're no longer in the way. I wish I had trusted my instincts earlier. I wish I had spoken up. But instead, I stayed silent. And my silence almost cost me everything. Looking back, there were signs, hints, little things that didn't feel quite right at the time, but I brushed them off. We always think betrayal comes like a thunderstorm, loud, fast, impossible to miss. But often, it creeps in like fog, slowly, quietly, and by the time you realize what's happening, it's already all around you. My daughter had always been strict-willed. Ever since she was a child, she needed control. She was the type who organized her toys by color, insisted on pouring her own milk at age 5, and threw fits when things didn't go her way. I used to say, she's going to be a CEO one day, and she very well could have been, if she had put her drive to good use. But somewhere along the way, that drive twisted into something darker. The first red flag came when she started visiting more often, but not to talk, or to spend time with me. She came with questions, about the house, about the bills, about the deed. "Do you have a will, Mom?" she asked one afternoon, casually, as if we were discussing the weather. "Where do you keep your important documents?" At first, I thought she was just being responsible, concerned. After all, I was getting older, and it made sense that she'd want to be prepared. But then the tone changed. She started coming by, unannounced, walking from room to room like she was taking inventory. She'd pick up a vase or a photo frame and look at it like it didn't belong there, like she was seeing the house as hers already. Then there were the conversations about my health. "You're forgetting things more often," she'd say. "You didn't remember that we spoke yesterday." I did. I remembered. She just didn't like what I had said, or maybe she wanted me to question myself. There was a time I caught her in my bedroom, rifling through my drawer. She claimed she was looking for a charger, but I had just cleaned that drawer the day before. My important papers were tucked beneath the liner. I noticed they'd been moved. Still, I said nothing. I didn't want to believe it. How do you accuse your own daughter of something so awful? How do you even begin to put those thoughts into words? My neighbor Linda said something one day while we were gardening. "Your daughter's been asking around," she said. "She asked me if you've been feeling all right lately. Said she's worried about you living alone." I laughed it off, but my stomach turned. Linda's words echoed in my mind for days. I should have seen it all then. I should have spoken up. But when the people we love start to change, our first instinct isn't suspicion. It's hope. We hope we're wrong. We hope it's just a phase. And we keep loving them, even as the ground starts to shift beneath our feet. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I had just finished my breakfast toast and a little marmalade, the way I like it when Nurse Carol came into my hospital room with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She had that look people wear when they're about to say something uncomfortable. "Mrs. Margaret," she said gently, "I saw something online this morning. I think you should know." She pulled out her phone and showed me the screen. It was a real estate listing. My house, photos of my kitchen, my living room, even the little herb garden George and I planted years ago, all up on a real estate website with the words, "Charming vintage home, vacant, ready for renovation. I froze. My fork clattered against the tray. I stared at the screen like it was a lie, like it couldn't possibly be true. Vacant, ready, for renovation. What did that mean? I was still living there. I had just been hospitalized temporarily. How could they list my house without me? I asked her to scroll down, to show me the agent's name. It was a local realtor I recognized, someone I had waved to in the grocery store. I asked Nurse Carol to hand me my phone. My fingers shook as I dialed. I called my daughter. She didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. Finally, on the third try, she picked up. "Mom," she said, like I was bothering her. "Are you okay? Why is my house listed for sale?" I asked. My voice didn't rise. I wasn't angry yet. I was stunned. She sighed. "I was going to tell you. I talked to the lawyer. We still have that power of attorney from a few years back. It was just temporary while you were in the hospital. I thought it made sense. You don't need that big place anymore." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "That's my home," I said quietly. "You'll be better off somewhere safer," she replied. "We found a nice assisted living place not far. They have activities, staff on hand 24/7. It's time, Mom." Time for what? To be dismissed. To be tucked away like an old sweater. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the chest. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a decision made without me, about me, against me. She had taken advantage of my vulnerability, of my trust. She had used paperwork I barely remembered signing and twisted it into a weapon. I hung up. My hands were cold. My mind raced. The hospital walls suddenly felt like a prison. I wasn't just healing from surgery. I was under siege. I asked for a social worker. I asked for a lawyer. And I started to fight. Because no one, no matter how close, no matter how loved, has the right to steal your life out from under you. That was the day I stopped being afraid. When I realized what was happening, I didn't know where to begin. I was in a hospital bed, still healing, and yet my entire world outside those walls was unraveling. The betrayal, the listing, the phone call, it all felt like a fever dream. But I knew one thing: if I didn't act fast, I would lose everything. The first step was to reach out to the hospital social worker. Her name was Rebecca, and thank the Lord she had a kind heart and a sharp mind. She listened, truly listened, as I poured out my story, how my daughter had power of attorney, how my house was suddenly for sale, and how I hadn't agreed to a single thing. "We need to talk to a legal advocate," she said. "I'll make some calls." By the end of that day, I had a meeting scheduled with a legal aid volunteer who worked with seniors in situations like mine. Her name was Angela. She arrived the next morning with a briefcase and a not-nonsense attitude. She asked for every document I could remember: power of attorney forms, medical history, anything that might help. "Your daughter used this temporary POA from 2 years ago," Angela said. "It doesn't give her the right to sell your home without your knowledge, especially if you're mentally competent and there's no court order in place." I remember crying when she said that, not just from relief, but because someone finally believed me. Angela acted fast. She filed a cease and desist to the realtor, halting the listing. Then she filed a revocation of the power of attorney, backed by a current psychological and medical evaluation from the hospital. My doctors agreed. I was of sound mind, clear memory, perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. It felt like a victory, but I knew it was only the beginning. My daughter wasn't going to let go so easily. The next week, I was discharged. I returned home under a cloud of anxiety. What would I find? Had she changed the locks? Was she still living there? When I pulled into the driveway, my neighbor Linda, driving me because I was too shaken to get behind the wheel. I saw my daughter's car parked right out front. I stepped onto the porch and took a deep breath. "This is still my home," I told myself. Inside, she was in the kitchen, acting like nothing had happened. She looked up from her phone and said, "I was going to call you." I set my bag down and stared at her. "You tried to sell my house while I was in the hospital. You need to leave." Her expression turned from feigned concern to fury. "You don't know what you're doing," she hissed. "You're making a mistake. I was trying to help you." Help, by erasing my life behind my back. Angela had advised me to avoid confrontation, but I needed her to see my strength. "You are no longer allowed on this property. My lawyer will be in contact." And then, I locked the door behind her. That moment hurt more than any wound I've ever had, but I knew it was necessary. I had to reclaim my power, not just legally, but emotionally. That house held my memories, my marriage, the life I had built. I wasn't going to let it be ripped away. The legal battle had just begun, but so had my healing. I never thought I'd see the day when my own child would feel like a stranger to me, but that's exactly what happened. After I had her removed from my home and took legal action to protect myself, there was a silence between Usevi and cold, and in that silence, I started to grieve, not for my house, or even for the betrayal itself, but for the daughter I once knew. When she was little, she used to curl up in my lap, with her hair still smelling like baby shampoo. She'd beg me to read the same bedtime story 3 times in a row, and I'd do it every time, even when I was tired. She used to call me her best friend. "Mommy doesn't listen like you do, Grandma," she'd whisper. That little girl, my sweet, open-hearted grandbaby, was gone, and the woman in her place, I didn't know her anymore. After she left my home, she didn't call. Not once. Weeks passed, and while I was sorting through the mess, she left bills she hadn't paid, notices from the listing agent, even some of my jewelry missing. I kept thinking, maybe she'll come to her senses. Maybe she'll apologize. But she didn't. Instead, I started getting calls from extended family. A cousin of hers told me, she says, "You've lost your mind, that you're paranoid. She's telling everyone you're not well." That cut me deeper than anything else. She wasn't just trying to take my home, she was trying to take my voice, my truth. I looked through old photo albums one evening, and I started crying. Not because of what she'd done recently, but because of what we'd lost. Every birthday party, every school recital, every hug, I had been there for all of it. I gave her everything I had. And now, she had discarded me like I was some burden, some obstacle in the way of her plans. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the rewriting of our entire history, the erasure of every good moment we ever shared. There's a loneliness that comes when someone you love is still alive, but the version of them you knew is gone. I tried to fill the space with hobbies, baking again, reading more. I started going to church twice a week, and I talked to the other women there, many of them grandmothers like me. You'd be surprised how many have stories just like mine. Sons, daughters, even grandchildren, who suddenly turned on them the moment money or property was involved. It made me feel less alone, but also more heartbroken. How did we get to this place, where family means nothing in the face of greed? There was one Sunday, after a long prayer group, when I stayed behind to light a candle. I remember whispering, "God, help me forgive her, but don't let me forget what she did, because forgetting would be dangerous. Forgetting would leave me vulnerable again, but forgiveness, that was for me. That was so I could move on." I started keeping a journal, just small notes every day. I'd write down what I felt, what I missed, what I was grateful for. It helped me focus on the love I still had around me. Friends, neighbors, even the new lawyer Angela helped me hire permanently. She checked in on me every week. She reminded me that I mattered, that I had rights, and that I wasn't crazy for protecting what was mine. Still, every so often, I'd glance at my phone and wonder if she'd ever call. She never did. That's when I knew we weren't mother and daughter anymore. We were something else to people with a shared history, now divided by betrayal and silence. But I also knew this: I might have lost my daughter, but I wasn't going to lose myself. After the legal scare and my daughter's attempt to take everything from me, I realized something very clear. It wasn't just about keeping my house anymore. It was about keeping me, my voice, my choices, my freedom, and that fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. The hardest part wasn't the legal forms or the court dates. No, the hardest part was proving, over and over again, that I was still capable, that I wasn't some fragile old woman who needed decisions made for her. Society has a funny way of looking at older folks. Once you reach a certain age, people assume you're no longer sharp. They speak slower to you. They nod while you talk, but you can see it in their eyes. They're not really listening. They've already made up their minds about who you are. And after what my daughter did, spreading rumors that I had dementia, faking paperwork, trying to get me put away, I knew I had to fight back, not just in court, but in perception. My first step, I made appointments with specialists. Not because I was sick, but because I wanted documentation. Neuropsych evaluations, memory testing, physical assessments, anything that would shut down the lies. I passed every single one. In fact, one doctor smiled and said, "You've got the mind of someone 20 years younger." I chuckled, but it felt like a victory. Then, I started taking control of the things she used to manage: my bills, my online banking, calling the insurance company to update my records. It was exhausting at times, but empowering. I bought a big planner and color-coded everything. Red for legal tasks, blue for medical, green for home maintenance. I felt like I was taking my life back piece by piece. But it wasn't just about the documents. It was also about reclaiming how I saw myself. For months, after all of this started, I'd walk past the mirror and barely recognize the woman staring back at me. Tired eyes, shoulders slumped. Fear in every wrinkle. So I changed that too. I got a new haircut, shorter and lighter. One donated some of the old clothes I never wore anymore, and bought a few new blouses that made me feel put together. I even started wearing lipstick again. Not for anyone else, but for me. I was showing up for myself, and then I made the boldest move yet. I hired a home security company. Some people might say it was paranoid. I say it was prepared. Cameras, new locks, motion sensors, the whole kit. My neighbor Linda helped me install the app on my phone. She said, "Now you can see who's at your door from anywhere in the house, or even while you're at church." We laughed. But inside I felt safer than I had in weeks. I also took a self-defense class at the senior center, just once a week, nothing too intense. But it gave me a sense of agency again. I was tired of being afraid. And finally, I got involved. I started volunteering with a local group that helps other seniors navigate elder abuse and fraud. I began telling my story, not out of bitterness, but as a warning. If it happened to me, it could happen to anyone. One afternoon, after a meeting, a woman approached me. She must have been in her late 60s. She said, "My son tried to change my will while I was in the hospital last year. No one believed me. But hearing you, I finally feel seen." That's when I knew this fight wasn't just mine. It was for every grandparent, every elder, every person who's ever been told they're too old to know better. My independence wasn't just a right, it was something worth protecting with everything I had. Because once you give it up, it's hard to get it back. But me, I wasn't giving it up for anyone, not even my own flesh and blood. For a while, I felt like I was standing alone in this battle. After all, the betrayal came from my own daughter, my own blood. That kind of pain isolates you. It makes you question everything. Your worth, your choices, even your memories. I found myself wondering, did I really raise her to be this way? Was I blind to who she truly was? But slowly, one by one, people around me started showing up. It started with Linda, my neighbor. She was the first one who noticed something was wrong. She had driven me home from the hospital, and when she saw my daughter's car in the driveway, she said nothing at first, but her hand on my shoulder told me everything I needed to feel strong enough to go inside. Later that week, Linda brought over a hot casserole chicken and rice, with extra cheese, just how I like it tanned, sat down in my kitchen with me. We talked for hours, and for the first time in what felt like ages, I wasn't crying alone. She told me, "I saw the for sale sign when you were gone. I knew something wasn't right. I just didn't know if I should interfere." Her words shook me. She knew, and yet, like so many good people, she didn't want to cross a line. That's when it hit me how many neighbors, friends, even strangers see warning signs and stay silent because they think it's family business. I started talking more, at church, at the local market, at the senior center. I didn't shout or accuse, I just shared my story with those who asked how I was doing. And one by one, their faces changed. Some were shocked, some were angry, some even had tears in their eyes. But the most powerful thing was when someone said, "That happened to my cousin," or "I've heard of that happening to Mrs. Jenkins down the road." Suddenly, this wasn't just my story, it was ours. Senior Center Director, Mr. Harris, invited me to speak at one of the Wednesday luncheons. I stood in front of a room full of older folks, people who looked like me, talked like me, trusted like me, and told them everything. You could hear a pin drop. After I finished, a woman named Shirley came up to me. "I gave my son power of attorney after my stroke," she said. "Now, I wonder if that was a mistake." That conversation led to a small support circle, 5 of us at first, sharing stories, tips, advice. One woman brought her daughter with her so she could hear my story firsthand. She said, "I want her to know what not to do when I'm old." It felt like community, like healing, like purpose. Even the younger folks started noticing. The cashier at the pharmacy offered to walk me to my car. A teenage boy down the street offered to mow my lawn. Not out of pity, but out of respect. Somehow, in opening up about my pain, I had earned something I hadn't felt in a long time: dignity. And you know what was most surprising? Even people who used to judge me, those who once whispered, "Poor Margaret, bless her heart," now saw me as someone who had been through hell and survived. It reminded me of something my husband used to say: "It's not who stands beside you when things are easy, but who stays when the storm rolls in." And my little town, those neighbors, church members, friends from long ago, they stayed. They stood beside me when I had nothing, when I felt broken, when I was ready to give up. Their love didn't erase the betrayal, but it rebuilt something even more important: my sense of belonging. Because no matter what my daughter took from me, my trust, my peace, nearly my home, she couldn't take away my community. And with their help, I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was standing tall. There was a time not too long ago when all I wanted was revenge. After everything my daughter did, trying to sell my home, lying about my mental health, calling the police on me as if I were a danger to myself, the rage I felt burned through steel. I wanted her to feel what I felt: abandoned, humiliated, afraid. I wanted justice, and yes, I'll admit it, I wanted her to suffer, even if just a little. But anger is a strange thing. At first it fuels you, it gives you purpose, energy. It helps you get out of bed, face the court dates, answer the lawyer's questions. But after a while, it begins to eat you alive from the inside. I'd wake up shaking, not because of what happened, no, because of how it was still happening inside me. My hands would tremble, my chest would tighten, and I would hear her voice, her insults, her lies, echoing in my mind like a broken record. That's when I knew I couldn't let her take anything more from me, not my peace, not my dignity, not the rest of my life. So I made a choice. I would seek closure, not revenge. Now don't get me wrong, closure doesn't mean letting someone off the hook. I still pressed charges for elder abuse. I still revoked her power of attorney. I testified when necessary. But I stopped waiting for her to apologize. I stopped hoping she'd come around and say, "I'm sorry, Mama, I made a mistake." Because closure, real closure, comes from within. I started going to therapy, yes, at 78 years old. I figured if I could survive almost losing my home, I could survive a few hard conversations with a stranger in a cardigan. And you know what? It helped that my therapist told me something I'll never forget. "What she did says more about her than it ever will about you." I repeated that line like a prayer. What she did says more about her than it does about me. And slowly, I started reclaiming things, not just my house or my independence, but my joy. I planted flowers again. I began baking just because I wanted to, not because I had guests. I even redecorated the guest room, taking down the old family photos that hurt too much and replacing them with pictures from my garden, my church group, even a painting I made myself. Yes, I took up painting, acrylics on canvas, bright colors, happy things, nothing dark. My soul had seen enough shadows. As for my daughter, I haven't spoken to her since the court finalized the restraining order. She sent a letter once. It wasn't an apology. It was a list of excuses and justifications. I didn't respond. I burned it in the fireplace, along with every piece of paper that reminded me of the pain. That day felt like a funeral, but in a good way. I buried the bitterness. I let it go, because I realized something else too. If I kept chasing revenge, I would become someone I didn't recognize. Someone bitter, angry, unkind. And that's not who I am. That's not who I raised myself to be. Instead, I started focusing on legacy, not revenge, not shame, but the legacy of a woman who endured something cruel and chose grace over hatred, who spoke out so other women, other mothers, wouldn't be caught off guard, who turned betrayal into a beacon for others. My story isn't about revenge anymore. It's about survival. It's about healing. It's about the quiet strength of an old woman sitting on her porch, hands wrinkled, heart heavy, but still smiling, because no matter how dark the past was, she chose light for her future. I chose light. I used to think that getting older meant losing things: your health, your memory, your independence. And yes, in many ways, that can be true. But what no one tells you is that sometimes, as you grow older, you gain something even more valuable: clarity. This whole ordeal taught me more than I ever learned in 78 years of living. It taught me about people, about love, about trust, and, most importantly, about myself. First, I learned that love doesn't always mean safety. I loved my daughter with every fiber of my being, I gave her everything, my time, my care, my trust. But love, when it isn't mutual, can be dangerous. And blind love, that can cost you everything. I learned that blood is not always thicker than betrayal. Just because someone is family doesn't mean they have your best interests at heart. I spent too long ignoring red flags because I was too ashamed to believe that my own child could turn against me, but she did. And the moment I accepted that truth, painful as it was, I found freedom. I learned that silence helps no one. So many older folks stay quiet out of fear, or pride, or shame. I almost did, too. But speaking up is what saved me, and maybe, just maybe, my story can help someone else find their voice before it's too late. I also learned that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. You never really know your strength until you have no other choice but to be strong. I thought I was just a grandmother, just a retired old woman, but I became a fighter, a survivor, a woman who faced not just betrayal, but a system that tried to push her aside, and I won. I learned that healing is not a destination. It's a process. There are still days when I wake up with a tight chest. Still moments when I look at the hallway where my daughter used to run as a little girl and feel a pang of grief. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means making peace with the memory and choosing to live anyway. And finally, I learned that dignity is something no one can take from you unless you give it away. No matter how broken you feel, no matter how betrayed you are, you can hold your head high and say, I survived. I am still here, because I am still here, and I am not done yet. If you've stayed with me this long, thank you. Thank you for listening, for holding space, for letting an old woman share a piece of her truth. This wasn't easy to tell, but I knew I had to tell it, not just for me, for the mothers who sit in silence, too scared to speak, for the grandmothers who are made to feel like a burden, for the women who gave their lives to raising a family, only to be left behind or used like they're nothing more than a signature on a legal document. You are not alone. I see you, I hear you, and I believe you. If someone had told me 5 years ago that I'd be fighting my own daughter in court, I would have laughed. I would have said, not my child, not my family. But life has a way of humbling you. It also has a way of giving you exactly what you need, right when you need it. I found strength I never knew I had. I found allies like Angela, my lawyer, like the social worker, Rebecca, like the kind neighbors who brought me meals when I got back from the hospital, and maybe most importantly, I found myself again, not the mother, not the widow, not the patient, but the woman who built a life with her own hands, the woman who didn't let betrayal define her, the woman who stood up, even when her knees were shaking. And now, I sit here on my porch, wind in my hair, sun on my face, and I feel something I thought I had lost forever: peace. So if you're listening to this, please, don't wait until someone takes everything to start fighting for something. Fight for your voice, your story, your home, your truth, because no one else can live it but you, and no one has the right to silence it. God bless you, and thank you for hearing mine.